I mean, now you understand that you have a lot of divides, a lot of fears. You have the well of water that is ripe for the poison of hysteria. So let's get hysterical.
We begin with the House vote tonight to sanction Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene for her bigoted and delusional views. These are her words. It's her bigotry, and these are her conspiracy theories.
Many Americans are like blind sheep, just going through life, not paying attention. There is an Islamic invasion into our government offices right now.
The so-called plane that crashed into the Pentagon. It's odd, there's never any evidence shown for a plane in the Pentagon. Kennedy getting killed in the plane crash. That's another one of those Clinton murders, right?
Deeply held religious beliefs and the superstitions of the day also help drive the events forward.
Q is a patriot. We know that for sure. Again, I don't have any proof of this, but we're talking about who is Q, so I'm going to tell you what he says. Many in our government are actively worshiping Satan, or they call Moloch.
The citizens of Salem Village began seeing witchcraft everywhere.
There's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take this global cable of Satan-worshiping pedophiles out.
Some have simply attributed the panic to mass psychogenic illness, or mass hysteria. Rampant accusations and fear fueled the frenzy which eventually led to the executions.
A lot of fear. You had a previous smallpox outbreak. There's a lot of fear. There's a fear of supernatural. There's a fear of Native Americans. There's a fear of disease. And all of these things to Puritan represents God's wrath. And we need to fight that.
Ah, yes, the Salem witch trials, which were, of course, a battle for America's soul versus witches. And one of the reasons it got so much traction is because no one wanted to be accused of being soft on witches.
And everybody's like, so wait a second, you're doubting us or you're questioning us? Like, that means you're a witch.
72-year-old Martha, she's not a witch. What are you talking about? Guess what, Giles? You're under arrest. You're a witch. And actually, he's the one who was crushed to death because they tried to get him to take a plea to say that he was guilty.
You have a man working for you in personnel, a young man named Alfred Brewster. Man's a communist. He should be discharged immediately.
Or McCarthyism, the battle for America's soul against communism. And one of the reasons it got so much traction is because no one wanted to be accused of being soft on communists. Or QAnon, the battle for America's soul against Satan-worshipping pedophiles.
Q is a patriot. We know that for sure. Again, I don't have any proof of this, but we're talking about who is Q, so I'm going to tell you what he says. Many in our government are actively worshiping Satan, or they call Moloch. Q is saying that they participate in pedophilia and spirit cooking.
Ah, yes, the invisible enemy. You see, biologically, if boys don't like girls and girls don't like boys, your species isn't going to procreate. So evolutionarily, pedophile is always going to be a minuscule minority. Now, all of these, of course, share the common theme that they're really, really heinous accusations, followed up by lowering the bar for evidence to finger-pointing, or its modern-day descendant, an anonymous person wrote it on an online conspiracy notice board. But, just like there is a biological necessity for a species to procreate itself, in that species that don't procreate themselves don't exist, there is also a biological need for organisms to have accurate threat detection. And sometimes it's prudent to play it safe. Yeah, sometimes it is just the wind blowing in the grass. Sometimes it's not. Naturally, the bigger the threat is, the more jittery people get about it. And one of the biggest ways to get people to vote for you is to scare them into thinking that there is a big, big threat. And all you have to do is vote for you and you'll take it away. Now, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with the politics of fear, if there is an actual threat. But what about the politics of fear when people erroneously believe that there is a real threat?
Accused of wearing torn garments, of wearing black, of dressing in odd customs. Obviously not a Puritan, and obviously a witch.
After all, if you really did believe that you were battling witches, saving people's souls from being corrupted. I mean, that would justify a certain ruthlessness, right? Now, none of this is remotely new, of course.
You have the debilitating German disease, vermin! Sentimental talk! It allows you to feel sensitive, superior, and yet stay safe because you take no action. Your sentimental suffering makes me sick.
You have scooped the most diseased psyches out of the German gutter. You have released the foulness that dwells in all men's minds. You have infected millions with your twisted fantasies.
There's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take this global cable of Satan-worshipping pedophiles out.
Where am I from? I am from you.
By the time the hysteria ended, 19 people had been hanged.
Cassius was right. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves.
Understand it. One must understand the period in which it happened. There was a fever over the land, a fever of disgrace. We had a democracy, yes, but it was torn by elements within. Above all, there was fear. Only when you understand that can you understand what Hitler meant to us. Because he said to us, lift your heads, be proud to be German.
Q is a patriot. We know that for sure.
There are devils among us, communists, liberals, Jews, gypsies. Once these devils will be destroyed, your misery will be destroyed.
There's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take this global cable of Satan-worshipping pedophiles out.
Just real quick, at the crux of the theory is this belief that you are secretly saving the world from this satanic cult of pedophiles and cannibals.
A witch was someone who allegedly gained magical powers by obeying Satan rather than God.
Does that sound like something you are behind? Or
well, I haven't heard that, but is that supposed to be a bad thing or a good thing?
Well, kinda. But this is like saying, would the Salem witch trials a bad thing? I mean, all they wanted to do was stop evil witches. I mean, is that supposed to be a bad thing? Yeah, look, I think we can all be pretty tolerant to crazy beliefs. But when those crazy beliefs start getting people killed, then it starts to become a problem. I mean, how many years does it take for a first world Christian democracy to start running, say, for instance, death camps? For Germany, a first world Christian democracy, in 1932, the answer would have been about 15 years. A cautionary tale for certain. And if you think that these people were all evil from the start, you might be disappointed. They were, of course, for the large part, frighteningly normal people, doing, in many cases, what they thought was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to save the country, with politicians who ran on a surprisingly familiar logic. Why, of course, the people don't want war. Why would some poor slob on a farm want to risk his life in a war when the best that he can get out of it is to come back to his farm in one piece? Naturally, the common people don't want war, neither in Russia, nor in England, nor in America, nor for that matter, in Germany. That's understood. But after all, it's the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it's always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it's in a democracy, a fascist dictatorship, a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. To which the interviewer interjects, but there's one difference. In a democracy, the people have a say in the matter through their elected representatives, and in the United States, only Congress can declare wars. Oh, that's very good and well, but voice or no voice, the people can always be brought along to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country. Yes. Meanwhile, the best part of a century later,
we cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun, that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Liar! And we believe he has in fact reconstituted nuclear weapons. Liar!
We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.
There is a tie between Iraq and what happened on 9/11.
all you have to do is tell them they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country. Just so you know, that was an interview between an American psychologist and Hermann Goering, who was one of the core Nazis, whilst he was on trial for war crimes, for which he would eventually be sentenced to death. The irony, of course, being is that some 50 or so years later, Germany took a different route when it came to appraising America's evidence that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction.
You have to make the case. And to make a case in the democracy, you must convince by yourself. Excuse me, I'm not convinced. This is my problem. And I cannot go to the public and say, oh, well, let's go to war because there are reasons and so on, and I don't believe in that.
In many ways, the real question is, are your fears justified? But if you wanted to take a look at this Marjorie Greene in more detail, and yes, that's her talking into a microphone with a face mask that says censored. Is she really that crazy?
She's also pushed the conspiracy theory that California wildfires were started by space lasers controlled by the Rothschilds, a family name which has been invoked by anti-Semites for generations.
Saudi Arabia, the Rothschilds, and Soros, he says, are the puppet masters that fund this global evil.
Well, yes, she is, of course. But in her brain, she probably sees herself as a virtuous crusader fighting evil Satan-worshipping pedophiles. Probably makes her feel quite good inside. Sure, it's a delusion, but it's a delusion that makes her feel good. And really, are her beliefs about Jewish space lasers starting Californian forest fires really so ridiculous? You see, it's one of the lesser known posts that Q made. God first talked to him and told him to become Q. He also told him that as a test of faith, he had to tie up his child and sacrifice him to God. And he knew it was God because he heard the voice in his head. And of course, he got to the point where he tied up his kid and was about to sacrifice him. But another voice came and said, no, don't sacrifice him. But what's truly amazing about this story about Q is that he had the faith to be willing to tie up and kill his child because he heard a voice in his head. Actually, no, I'm kidding. That's not Q. This is the story of Abraham, which is the core story of all of the Abrahamic religions. Judaism, Christianity, which is Judaism Mark 2.0, and Islam, which is Judaism Mark 3.0. And you get to things like Mormonism, which is, Judaism with magic underwear. Now, if someone acted like this in today's society, the diagnosis is swift. The guy has mental illness, and you should get the kids away from him as quick as possible before he harms one of them. However, Abraham didn't have the benefit of a modern healthcare system with some 300 years of experience in dealing with treating mental illness. So he became the central prophet of a religion that is believed in one form or another by about half the people on the planet. Hell, the leaders of America have a tradition of swearing in on this book, which, after Abraham, goes into the blood sacrifices in graphic detail about how you should chop up the animals and then which fingers and toes you should dip into the blood. Specifically, in Leviticus, when God is telling the Moses Brigade how to properly worship him, he says, he shall slaughter a lamb for the guilt offering, and take some of the blood and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and the big toe of his right foot. And that is how God tells these people that they need to worship him. Why the right side? I'm not entirely certain. After that, it goes into genocide. After Moses takes some 40 years to walk 100 or so miles around the Mediterranean, You know how hard it is to get that lost in the desert. You know, you see the stars every night. All you got to do is keep walking in one direction. But anyway, ignoring Moses' absolute inability to navigate, after some 40 years, they get to a place, and a voice says in Moses' head, I'm giving you all that land there. All you've got to do is kill everyone there first. Yes, the plot holes come quick and fast in the Bible. Apparently the God who made the entire universe wasn't capable of giving his chosen people their own land. Instead, he makes them walk 1/10 the way around the Mediterranean and kill everyone who is currently living there. There then ensues a series of atrocities that would make the Nazis blush. The conquest of the Midianites. Then the Israelite army captured the Midianite women and children and seized all their cattle and flocks and all their wealth as plunder. They burned down all the towns and villages where the Midianites had lived and gathered all the plunder, both people and animals. They brought them to Moses and Elijah the priest. But Moses was furious at the generals and captains who had returned from the battle. Why have you let the women live? He demanded. These are the very ones that followed Balaam's advice and caused the people of Israel to rebel against the Lord at Mount Peor. They are the ones who caused the plague to strike the Lord's people.
A lot of fear. You had a previous smallpox outbreak. There's a lot of fear. There's a fear of supernatural.
So, kill all the boys and all the women who have had intercourse with a man, and only the young girls who are virgins may live. You may keep them for yourselves. Division of the plunder. And then the Lord said to Moses, you and Elijah the priest, blah, 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 blah. You're going to get about 1/500th portion of the cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats. Half of the plunder was given to the fighting men, in total, blah, 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 of which 675 were the Lord's share. Yes, for this genocide, the Lord got 675 sheep. This is the book that politicians swear themselves in to office on. And then a lot of boring stuff happens, occasionally lightened up by the odd talking donkey. Yes, there is actually a talking donkey in the Bible. And when the donkey first talks, the owner of the donkey doesn't say, wow, that's amazing, you can talk, but just continues to have a conversation with the donkey like it's not in the slightest bit remarkable. Then not a lot happens till, according to the book, the Christian God comes up with a remarkable idea that he's going to sacrifice himself to himself so he can forgive people. Like, why couldn't he just forgive them? You know, like your average person does. Well, apparently your average person can do things that God can't, you know. Omnipotence is funny like that. In modern day film critic writing, this would be called lazy writing. You know, God's omnipotent when it's convenient for the script. Anyway, turns himself into a human, hangs around with a bunch of people for a couple of years. Then when Jesus is about to be killed, boom, they're all like, ha, this is the Son of God. We've been hanging around with him for a couple of years now. You really think that nailing him to a tree is going to do anything?
You guys are so screwed now!
Nah, they just assume like he's a regular guy who got killed. And, you know, they go off and do their own thing. In fact, it always struck me as one of the craziest plot holes in the Bible is that the disciples, the people who hung around with what is supposedly the Son of God for months to years, you couldn't actually tell that they were hanging around with a God? Really? Like even in the story, when Jesus comes back from the dead, or whatever, you know, reanimates the meat puppet, nah, I really don't believe it's you. Let me stick my fingers in the holes. For certain, the bigger plot hole here is the idea that this was a sacrifice. Well, not really if you're a god. You know, you're creating a meat puppet, which you're getting killed by other meat puppets. I mean, how is any of this a sacrifice for an immortal being? And the Bible's full of really important details, like when Jesus comes back from the dead, he eats some fish and honey. You know, there's how you might expect things to go down. Like, you know, Jesus gets nailed to a tree and comes back. And his disciples are like, well, yeah, you're the God that created the universe. We didn't seriously expect nailing you to a tree to do anything. Actually, that's not quite how it goes down in the Bible. And Jesus comes back and saith to them, peace be upon you. But they were terrified and affrighted, and supposed that they had seen a spirit. And he says unto them, why art thou troubled, and why doth thou thoughts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and feet, that I myself handle me, and see, for the spirit hath not flesh and bones, as ye see me have. And when he had spoken, he showed them his hands and feet. And they needed to be shown this because they didn't believe that he was a god or something. And while they believed not for joy and wondering, this is what I mean. Didn't exactly sound like they were really wrapped up in the idea this was the Son of God. Have ye any meat here? And they gave him a piece of broiled fish and of a honeycomb. And he took it and did eat before them. Because that's always what you want when you come back from the dead, is some broiled fish and honeycomb. And then he ascends into heaven, because, like, whatever. And it came to pass, while he blessed them, and he was parted from them and carried up into heaven. Because if you go up in the sky, you get to heaven, rather than, you get to the thinner atmosphere, then space and all that sort of thing, where you just asphyxiate. Now, apparently, you just float up into the sky, because that's where heaven is. Maybe just a smidge to the left of where this woman thinks the Jewish space lasers are. I mean, seriously, on the grand scheme of things, are her beliefs about space lasers the craziest thing here? There's another famous quote from a Nazi propaganda minister, a guy called Goebbels, famous peddler of disinformation. He said something that a lie told once remains a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. And many attributed this to him being some evil peddler of disinformation that ended up in the ruination of a country. But was it really? I mean, is this not just the observation of how a cult becomes codified into a religion? Something that predates Goebbels by a considerable time. So before I leave you, let me just tell you that YouTube demonetized a couple of my recent videos. The one on the coronavirus, of course, because the guy's been consistently right about the coronavirus. Yeah, that's the one you want to demonetize. And I've got good reasons for thinking this is simply because someone's got it in for this channel, because I do regular updates on the coronavirus on the Voice of Thunder channel and have never had any problems like this. I was even more stunned when the video debunking Elon Musk's electric planes got demonetized because a human found that your video is suitable for limited ads because it contains edited video gameplay that primarily focuses on graphic violence, severe violence, death that shows blood, harm to minors, abuse of animals, domestic violence, graphic dead bodies in a non-educational video. Yeah. Now, thankfully, I have a lot of people who support this channel through Patreon, so it's not immediately a problem for me. But I would like to say a big thank you to all of those who do actually support this channel through Patreon, because that really does give me a buffer against the human reviewers at YouTube.